A gap is you able to communicate in moments or less that some small part of that person's reality is broken. And so there are like, I think I listed at one point and wrote out for clients and to teach people, like, I think there's like 32, 33 possible gaps, but the first three are the like if you only learn the first three, it's like they say like, pop music only has like four chords, right? And you can make any song, you can make anything out of just the first three gaps. Now, there is like one gap which everyone tries to use. And the 99 point something percent of everyone company tries to, here's the gap. And it is this: hey, we have changed something or made something. Sit still while we talk about ourselves. Right? By far the weakest and most terrible of all the gaps, because it completely relies on someone being at exactly the right moment in their process to care about what you're saying. But the three gaps come down to either one, everybody always believed X, and it turns out X was never true, right? Or number two, X used to be true, but it recently changed, or it's about to change. Maybe laws are going to change, or the industry is going to change, or whatever, right? And then number three is X is true. X is true for most people, not for you. If you try to do X or use X, not going to work for you. You're special. You're different, right? So like a really dumb, boiled down, ridiculous example would be milk, right? So the first gap would be everyone thought that milk was healthy. Turns out it never was. I'm sure milk is healthy. I'm not saying that. The second one is milk used to be healthy, but now that they're allowed to put certain stuff in it, it's about to not be healthy. So your reality is broken again. And then the third is milk's great, but not for you. So you shouldn't be drinking milk anymore. Let me tell you what your alternatives are.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing Podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin Lee with the E-Marketing Association. I also run an agency, Did It. I've got my own brand, Truth Nutrition, and I run a nonprofit. And so under all of those hats, marketing communication is key, and getting the right language and the right talking points and the right copy and the right hook is always so critically important, which is why I'm so excited to be chatting with Dean Wayne today, because that's what he does. So Dean, let's talk about your process and how it may differ from what people might think one goes through when crafting messages and coming up with headlines and topics.
Well, hi. And it helps to be hyper specialized. And so when you think of all of the types of copywriting that exist, like maybe 95% of all copywriters are content writers, although that percentage is probably a lot lower now because AI has taken so much of that work. I never wrote content for folks, so I wasn't super affected by that. But you can imagine that every prospect or customer goes on a customer journey, right? Like a buyer's journey. And someone has to focus, most people do, focus on writing or creating for people who are already interested. And then a small percentage of us are focused on interesting the people who we're interested in, but they're not. So every company has like some list of, or an idea, like people in this kind of company, or people who live in this area, or people who have this job title, or people who run companies of this size, or people in this industry. Like more of them should be way more interested in us, and it's not happening. So can you make them interested in us? And then within that kind of small field, I'm even further niched down or niched up in that I focus on the first moment up until the first few minutes of some stranger's attention on behalf of that company. And that's it. Like I don't write beyond that. Whatever happens beyond that, I just get them in through a door. And then there's supposed to be a bunch of other people inside the building who can like take their hand and walk them around and show them and all that kind of stuff. My only job is to make uninterested people temporarily interested so we can get a conversation on.
So that sounds quite challenging because for many of the channels that marketers rely on now, that first ADD moment where you have to break through
Yeah.
the person's attention span and capture them, whether they call it a hook or in the case of an email, it might be a headline or a subject line. In the case of a TikTok or a YouTube video, it's that first couple of seconds.
TikTok's the worst. You have like maybe a half to three quarters of 1 second at the very top to get
So,
somewhere, right?
so when you go down that rabbit hole and you start to think through how many seconds or milliseconds you have, right?
Yeah.
And you have copy messaging and maybe have visual as well. So how do those intersect in ways for you in that if you're writing something that's purely textual or creating something that's purely textual, like an email subject line or
Right.
an SMS text, which of course those doing those cold have all sorts of regulatory issues, or
Yes.
maybe it's a voicemail script that a person is leaving, but it's the first time that they're interacting with the brand. And what's the thought process that you go through that allows you to come up with the winners?
Well, I'll tell you, um, most of the time you'll rely on a gap, and a gap is you able to communicate in moments or less that some small part of that person's reality is broken. And so there are like, I think I listed at one point, I wrote out for clients and to teach people, like, I think there's like 32, 33 possible gaps, but the first three are the like if you only learn the first three, it's like they say like, pop music only has like four chords, right? And you can make any song, you can make anything out of just the first three gaps. Now, there is like one gap which everyone tries to use. And the 99 point something percent of everyone company tries to say, here's the gap. And it is this. Hey, we have changed something or made something. Sit still while we talk about ourselves. Right? By far the weakest and most terrible of all the gaps. Because it completely relies on someone being at exactly the right moment in their process to care about what you're saying. But the three gaps come down to either one, everybody always believed X, and it turns out X was never true, right? Or number two, X used to be true, but it recently changed, or it's about to change. Maybe laws are going to change, or the industry is going to change, or whatever, right? And then number three is X is true. X is true for most people, not for you. If you try to do X or use X, not going to work for you. You're special. You're different. Right. So like a really dumb, boiled down, ridiculous example would be milk, right? So the first gap would be everyone thought that milk was healthy. Turns out it never was. Like, I'm sure milk is healthy. I'm not saying that. The second one is milk used to be healthy, but now that they're allowed to put certain stuff in it, it's about to not be healthy. So your reality is broken again. And then the third is milk's great, but not for you. So you shouldn't be drinking milk anymore. Let me tell you what your alternatives are. And then it's like the four chords of pop music, right? Those three gaps alone will almost always give you something workable for the first few moments of someone's attention. Because of course your solution or your message or whatever follows what you've written is what fixes that tiny part of their reality that's broken. People really hate it when a tiny part of their reality isn't like sewn up. And so they'll give you a few extra seconds, right? And then sort of the next step right after that is just telling them, every company wants to tell its own story, and it's way cheaper, way cheaper. A little more work in the beginning, more thought has to go into the other approach, but it's way cheaper overall to just tell them their own story and put you in it. But nobody wants to do it. Everyone wants to talk about themselves instead of figuring out like how to tell someone, because people will listen to you talk about them a long time and often. And then you stick yourself in there as a character, works great. You want to make yourself the main character and make them sit still and pay attention to you? People don't want to do it. I don't blame them. I don't want to do it either.
I'm thinking through to some of the longer running YouTube ads that I've noticed, right? That
Yeah.
that have hooks that I think either were your clients or followed a very similar methodology in coming up with it because, the pattern interrupt that they use is very much the, altered reality
Yeah.
or the missing piece of the puzzle kind of a hook. And some of those long form used to be called infomercials when they were on regular TV, but of course now I think they're called VSLs or video
Right.
sales letters. Those definitely you can see people playing with those hooks.
Yeah, exactly. They create a whole sort of worldview, or like, what do they call that in fiction? where they sort of, I mean, they just sort of create a world, right? They'll start off with a gap where you may or may not have, it's usually related to some small thing, annoyance that you had, right? Or problem that recurred. Or the ultimate, if you can, we call this naming the nameless. So if you can put a name on a problem that a lot of people experience, but they've never really named it before, that's
Yeah.
gold.
Yeah.
Naming the nameless is great. And then they sort of build, there's this whole world building around it. Like not only did you not, or can you not cook eggs, not only can you not rotisserie a chicken at home, why have you never been able to rotisserie your own chicken? Like you've been left out. And this is great. But not only that, but here's knives that you can also use to slice the chicken. Like it's all complete now. Come into
Yeah.
this world. And they just sort of draw you in. Yeah. It's ridiculous storytelling, but it is pure storytelling.
Right, right. So a lot of copywriters I've run into over the years, and some I've hired, have sort of drawn parallels between sort of the hero's journey in movies and script writing for traditional, entertainment, and the story arcs of commercials. If you have more than 15 seconds, right,
Yeah.
a 30 or a 60 or a longer form video content, and you've also seen folks do sort of take a similar approach with longer landing pages. So,
Yes.
are there any situations where you feel like, okay, we have to break all those rules. We have to do things completely differently, for you, Mr. Client or Miss Client or whatever, and we need to sort of uh, break through the clutter in different ways.
Now, I mostly work in B2B, and it's extra challenging in B2B because people either don't understand the different motivations and challenges you have in B2B, or else they just think B2B is the kid brother of B2C. And in fairness, like all psychological research and metrics and testing and everything else that's happened for the last 150 years in the world of advertising marketing has been B2C, right? So almost all of the sort of knowledge comes from there. And there's almost none that seems to be particularly useful other than the, whether it's true or not, the sort of truism that only 5% of your market is in market in B2B at any one time. And the 95% you're just sort of educating them and trying to draw them in. And so it's challenging in B2B. But the way I explain it for clients is, while you can't ever get past the safety factor in B2B. Like no company buys from another company if they think that you're not going to be around. And then the other big thing relative to B2C is there's really no concept of scarcity in B2B, right? You can't say like we're only selling 17 of these and then there's no more. Right? Most companies don't buy something today that they can't buy tomorrow. In a lot of cases, they're buying from you, turning it into something else, and then selling it to their customers. And so it's always tricky around that. So you can never get away from safety, and you can kind of never get away from safe edges. So, you can't be crazy or wacky, but you do have to go out to an edge, most trusted, longest lasting. We've been in business, since the dinosaurs, whatever. I do tell them this. I say, look, it doesn't matter how much traffic there is on a street. The middle of the road is always still the most dangerous place to be. Be on either side of the road, great. Being in the middle, terrible. And so you cannot be in the middle. There's no safety in numbers in marketing. If you sound like everyone else, you're instantly forgotten. And then I tell them, like relative to B2C, because a lot of times I'm brought in by the CMO or fractional CMO, and they'll have had some experience in B2C as well. And I say, what we aim for in B2B is a little different. In B2C, your ultimate goal is to put a thought into that person's head, and that thought is, I need that, right? It transcends want. I need that shampoo, right? And in B2B, it's not that at all. It's that, my manager is going to want to talk to these guys because you're almost never talking to the ultimate decision maker in B2B marketing. And so you're always moving up, right? So it's a series of like, my boss is going to want to talk to you guys. And then like, okay, we're going to move a little closer. Can we move a little closer? Okay, you can come a little closer. Okay, great. Hey, can we come a little closer again? All right, I guess you can come a little closer. We'll get another meeting, right? And you're working your way in until your contract gets signed. But B2B is like, it's a different tempo. It's way more challenging. To me, B2B marketing is like you're being told, hey, we need you to also build a rocket, but you're going to work it out of this garage and we have bicycle parts. Go. And that's what you
So,
have to do.
so yeah, I mean, a follow-up question to that. Obviously, often when you talk to B2B marketers, they've got their ideal customer profile from an industry perspective, but then they sort of know that for an enterprise customer, there's sort of this decision by committee. And sometimes the committee members have
Yes.
different roles, and because they have different roles, hypothetically at least, they have different pain points. So you've got, the
And
engineer who
competing
could
pain
stand
points.
in the
Yeah.
way of the decision, but not can't really is not a decision maker on their own. And then you've got purchasing who really only cares about price. And then you've got,
Yes.
these other potential influencers, some of whom only have blocking ability, but others of whom could very positively influence the sale. So do you find that you end up having to craft your messaging differently if there's a lot of a committee, a sort of decision by committee scenario?
There's almost always a decision by committee in B2B, if especially if it's big enough. And even if a company is selling to another business or business person, if that person alone could whip out a company credit card or issue a PO and buy it, it's basically a variation of a B2C sale,
Right.
right? And all of the old stuff still applies. But yeah, so you kind of always, the way that when I was in sales, at enterprise sales back in the day, we always considered that every sale, and sales would take anywhere from 3 to 24 months to complete. Every sale was actually two sales on two tracks. There was a technical sale and a business sale. And the technical people, they can only say no. They can't say yes. Like it doesn't matter how much they love you, they don't have budget. And so there are no people, veto people, like you're blocking people, like you were saying. And then there's a very small number of yes people, potential yes people, right? And that's the business sale. And someone on the business side, a VP, can decide they're going to buy something over the objections of technical people. It's happened all the time, right? Why did we buy this? We didn't want this one. We wanted the other one. But, management said this is the one to buy. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what they're willing. Everyone's been in that situation. And on the flip side of that, you never want to be, you finally get the meeting with the VP for 15 minutes after spending 4 months with the technical side. The technical people love you. The VP is looking at this like, why are we having this meeting? Like, this isn't even on my plan for this year. Like, go away. Right. So there are always two sales. And then you've always got the competing priorities on the business side that you're trying to deal with. So yeah, it's always fun, but you're always trying to do ultimately the same thing. It's like, hey, yeah, I mean, VPs have bosses, CEOs have bosses, they have boards to, right? And it's always like, my boss is going to want to talk to these guys. Or which is another way of saying it's safe for me to vouch for these guys to the next level up. And so that's kind of
So
what you're always aiming for. Like you can't do everything. You can't keep every priority and goal on the customer side in mind for everything. Otherwise, what if you do write something that the best you can do is not offend anyone, and then you're back in the middle, right? There's
yeah,
no
for
such thing as
sure.
something that the CFO loves and the CMO also loves. It just never happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, yeah, you're back to the don't stay in
Yeah.
the
You
middle.
want one of them loves it, one of them doesn't hate it or doesn't care enough to, or it's not worth the fight right now.
So let's move to the choreography, right? Because a lot
Sure.
of this choreography that you're describing does move beyond that first few minutes, but yet that's the area where
Yeah.
you're getting the
I do the
hook.
first few minutes
Yeah,
on the marketing side
right,
and the first few minutes on the sales side.
right.
So as someone graduates from like cold lead to warm lead, then eventually they're handed over, right? Whether
Yeah.
that you call that a
So I would
marketing qualified.
imagine you have to make sure they don't break it, right? After you get the
Yes.
hook in there and the people are coming in through the flow, right? To the extent that there's some cognitive dissonance on messaging after you get them through the door, whether it's to the landing page or they return a call or whatever it is, now you need to be able to pay off that initial messaging that you crafted. So I would imagine you do you leave your clients with essentially, okay, so I've done my job, but you need to make sure that we have some consistent messaging or on a
Yeah.
go forward basis.
Yep. Ultimately, I will have two mini engagements at a client instead of one major one. So instead of one major engagement with marketing and then like, hey guys, bye, then it's a smaller engagement with marketing and then a similar engagement with sales. Where so I write like voicemail scripts for salespeople and SDRs. I write the first emails that get sent out to someone who's now been qualified from the CRM, right? To like start, it's basically like starting the process all over again. I'll write the first I won't necessarily anymore. I used to. I don't write like the entire sales demo or sales webinar, but I'll write like the first 5 minutes of it,
Hmm.
right? Which is when most people, if they make it past the 5 minute mark, they'll stay. But if you lose them in the first minute or two or three, like it's not for me, and they're gone. And it takes a lot of work and money to get people onto a demo or a webinar. And so, yeah,
So,
ideally I'll be at the beginning, the top of the process for marketing, and then the top of the process for sales is marketing, so that it's consistent all the way through.
so one of the things that I love about your approach is, marketers are stuck in this situation now, which is quite different than it was 15 or 20 years ago, where almost all the media that they're buying
Hmm.
is auctioned off in some way, right?
Hmm.
Paid search is auctioned off, social is auctioned off, programmatic display and CTV, they're all auctioned off. And pricing can get pretty expensive, especially as you go more niche into the audience that you want. And B2B, the prices can be quite obscene.
Yes.
And so if the system breaks at that initial point, which is the part that's under your purview, right? Then you never get it. You can't afford the media, right?
Right.
But if you get it humming really well, it really empowers, it opens up additional media opportunities that might otherwise be off the plan altogether.
Right.
So, do you have any, without naming names, do you have any sort of case studies of situations where you'll be able to do this unlock and rescue the sales and the media side?
Yes, actually. So, because today we're recording this on a Friday, and this happened to come up in a conversation earlier in the week. Otherwise, I might not have remembered it in such a timely manner. As I have a client, and I only have NDAs with 3 clients, and this happens to be one of them. But let's just say it is a worldwide, enormous management consulting company that you've definitely heard of, and is so rich it like almost acts as a private equity firm and buys subsidiaries that are sort of, you would not think, it's like, why are you buying that company? They make widgets. Yeah. But so this company, uh, the short answer, by the way, before I go down like a rat hole, the short answer to your question is, if the initial sort of salvo, the initial message, the very first like headline, the subheadline, the positioning we take, the sales story or angle, if it's good enough, if it's breakthrough enough, then it will earn the money that's spent on it. And so that's kind of the bar that I have to aim for. It has to be different enough to like pop out in everyone's endless feed. And, it doesn't matter really what an ad costs if people click on it and then convert
Of
and
course.
then become profitable, because then you use that money or some of it to buy more ads, and sort of like a virtuous circle, right? As opposed to the other way where you're spending the money and no one's buying it and like you've wasted it. But yeah, you'll get into some tight spots in B2C. Like this client wanted a positioning. They wanted an angle, a story angle, but where they were going after a tier of clients, a size and available budget tier of clients that was below where they were. Imagine it's not Toyota, but imagine that it's Lexus. And then they want to convince a whole bunch of people who would never look at a Lexus because of the price that they can now afford the very same Lexus. Like there's no difference at all, right? But you can't cannibalize the premium brand for it. So I couldn't say why it was cheaper. I couldn't say why it was being marketed to them. I couldn't say where the manufacturing or design was being done, which is one of the reasons it was cheaper, right? I mean, I could say that, but everyone would immediately be suspicious, and I don't blame them. That was kind of them. So I had to figure out a way so that I could like break through and sell the story to these folks that even though you would have never considered buying this thing from this company, you're actually in a sweet spot for buying it. And we're able to do it. And because of this sort of like change, still true, because you don't lie to anybody ever, but still true story, but a different story than you would have gotten. And it was like, it's kind of contorting and weird. And ultimately, it came down to, do you know who Rory Sutherland is?
Name sounds
He
familiar.
wrote a book a few years ago called Alchemy, which is really good. He's an English guy. He's been on like every podcast you've ever seen. I think he just like goes on podcasts. It's like a second job. Yeah, but funny guy. And I had to remember a story from years ago where he was talking about a perception problem with the Royal Mail, like the postal service in England. And he said it would be very simple for the Royal Mail to improve its public perception if they just printed a tiny little like chart on every first class envelope explaining that the on time percentage, or like the 2 day delivery percentage for first class mail in this country is this, and it turns out second place was Germany at like 98.6%. And then the UK was 98.8%. He says nothing will convince the Britons that something is great than to show them it's better than the Germans. If you want to prove a system is efficient and you can show that it's more efficient than Germany's, no one questions it. You're in. And I looked at that and I called my contact at this big management company, consulting company, and I said, "Hey, on your like regular operations, what's the on-time delivery? Like once you guys have the scope of the project and you know it's because they're all custom built, huge things, like fit on a train kind of thing. What's the on-time delivery percentage where like once you commit to a date, it will be done and delivered to your facility by this date? What's your on-time delivery success rate for that?" And he said, "Oh, it's fantastic. We're very proud of it. We talk about it all the time. It's 98%. If we tell you it's going to be there on May 1st, there's a 98% chance it's going to show up on a truck or a train on May 1st. I said, "That's great." So I said, what we'll do is for the people who are in the lower tier, who are going to get the same machine, but at a different price, a lower price, we'll say, "Hey, we got bought by this bigger company. You've heard of them. They're enormous. For the last 2 years, we've had, a lot of like capital influx and like their consulting expertise and so on. And we have some additional capacity now. So we wouldn't want to say excess capacity, we would say additional capacity." So I said, if you're willing to accept the fact that there's a 2% chance that it might show up a few days later, you can save like $38,000 on this machine. I said, that's it. Like that's the approach we can take, because it's absolutely true. They do have a 2% chance of it being late, just like everyone else, but we're focusing on the 2% instead of the 98. It's believable. And now you can like explain, "Hey, here's your thing." And most of those people, for $38,000, it might show up on Wednesday instead of Monday. Done. My boss is going to think I'm a hero.
Yep.
And so that's what we ended up doing.
That's a great story.
It's silly, but it's worked.
So obviously, you mentioned a big name, and just so folks who happen to be watching this and have realized they like the way you think, where's the sweet spot for you? Like, at what point of size company or size engagement should they give you a call?
Um, I work with a lot of fractional CMOs, and they tend to work with startups. So almost all of my startup work comes from fractional CMOs. And then I work for a small number of sort of interim CMOs and CMO coaches, and they'll tend to bring me in on these enormous PE-backed, private equity-backed firms that are, doing hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And so what I don't get to work on nearly as much as I'd like is everybody else in the middle of that. Everybody above like 5 million in annual revenue and below a billion, which is a huge number, right? There's a lot of companies in that space now. And for whatever reason, startups and very, very big companies tend to get the most creative marketing people. I guess startups because there's either like an equity possibility or it's just, interesting and there's a lot of them and it's like pressure. But if you break through, it's like, "Hey, I helped this startup get started." And then on the big ones, it's like, "Look at this, how prestigious this is," right? The management consulting company is one of the few very, very multi-billion-dollar companies that didn't come through a fractional CMO or an interim. Like they're a direct client for me, writing for their sales and marketing teams. But for the most part, it's the people in the middle who have like the most interesting stories to tell, and we just don't seem to find each other very much. Which is another way of saying I'm not doing good enough marketing on that, as I.
All right. Well, we'll see if we can get you some of those interesting businesses to write copy for. So what else didn't we cover today that folks should think about as they think about improving their copy, improving their hooks, and capturing those people when they haven't yet decided they have a problem?
Well, let's see. Let's talk about email. Let's talk about cold email. which is still, very lucrative, but becoming harder and harder to break through with because of all the AI generated personalization. Hey, I noticed that you're in this industry doing this and that and blah, blah, blah. And everyone, it's weird that we all have a skill now that none of us even imagined would be a skill 4 years ago, which was we can read something and know if AI wrote it. Yeah. That was on nobody's bingo card in 2000. And now here we are. So, oh yeah, more AI stuff. Got it. Oh. So you can think of the ultimate goal of a cold email or like an email to someone that you don't have a good commercial relationship with yet is that you're trying to create a welcome distraction. So everyone at the VP level and above, they have an incredibly fragmented day, right? Their day is chopped up into as small as 5 or 10 or 15-minute increments. This meeting and that meeting, and I'll walk by and jump on this call. And, but they get these little tiny, if you imagine that their whole day is like just one long bar and it's all colored in these blocks, but there's these little white blocks that are in between. Okay, this one's done and I got a few minutes. I'm going to swing by and grab myself a coffee or use the bathroom or just like sit at my desk for a second, take a breath until the next problem comes up or the next meeting has to start or the next call I got to jump on. Right. They have all these little tiny like white spaces in their day. And in almost every case, they're looking for some kind of welcome distraction. I don't know if you've ever heard the concept or theory about video games generally, but video games especially, that all video games are based on the concept of cleaning. On almost every video game, you're doing some kind of cleaning. You're cleaning out a base, you're cleaning out a row. You're like, if it's Tetris, you're cleaning out like the bottom and they're disappearing, right? You're finding all the things that match, and when you match them, they like poof or whatever. It's all based on cleaning, and almost all welcome distractions are based on cleaning. And there's a reason why so many people, no matter how high up in the organization they are, still at least look at their own inbox. They might have an assistant who's like making sure that the important stuff gets flagged, but and most of us, checking email is just another way of saying deleting email without reading it. And so with the welcome distraction, the goal is to get it opened, get it very quickly read, and then have some tiny, tiny sense of accomplishment possible by that person doing something with it. Usually passing it down to someone to follow up on, or once in a while clicking. Very rarely replying, and never calling. No one calls strangers, but they don't even take phone calls from strangers, let alone make phone calls from strangers. But if you can become that welcome distraction, and that's your goal, which is a pretty high bar, because you have to assume when you're writing a cold email that you're reaching that person on the most stressed out, most terrible day of their year or career, and you still need to get your stuff opened, right? It's a very high bar to do cold email really well. But if you can design around that concept, I'm going to create a welcome distraction so that this person is going to feel like they accomplished something tiny, right? They cleaned something just by interacting with this, like, pixels on a screen or on their phone, then that's great. And that's what you aim for. And then, of course, the other thing to remember for a lot of B2B marketing and most cold outbound prospecting, whether it's sales or marketing, is that it really is a series of you're trying to cross the Grand Canyon by going over a bunch of rope bridges. And a rope bridge will get you from this side to the side you're going. It doesn't allow you to use much weight. And so if you try to overdo it, it'll break, and then the progress stops. Like the from name in an inbox, its only job is to not make someone delete the email, which is why you almost never have a from name as marketing team at, right? It's not going to work. And then the subject line's job is not to educate the person about what the email is about. It's to get the email opened without lying to anybody. That's all. That's its only job, right? Now, if you're sending an email to another person in your company, the subject line's job is to tell the person what the email's about, because you've already got the relationship. But if you're a stranger, its only job, without lying to them, is to get the email opened. And then the email's only job is to get something to happen after they've read it. And it should be very, very short. Either click something, forward it on to someone else, think about it, just think about it later. Try to have it come up in their head when they're in line at Starbucks or whatever, right? Or, reply. But, or maybe, ideally, book something. But the email's only job is to get someone to go somewhere else or send the email somewhere else. And then if there's a landing page at the end of that process, the landing page's job, now that you have room and breathing room and runway, is to like tell that person their own story with them in it. Right.
That's an
But if you
amazing
try to
framework.
put too much weight on any of it, right, it breaks and they never make it to the next stage. And ultimately they never get to the pass it along or go to the landing page or whatever.
Yeah,
People
to
try
me,
to do too
that sort of
much.
to some extent fits within a video game framework as well, right?
Yeah.
Is the video game is almost all the video games are about progress, right?
Yeah.
So you don't go straight for the big win in most video games. You know, it's you're making small progress.
Yeah.
You're not buying a lottery ticket. You're on a journey, right?
Right. I
To
imagine that
some extent.
every senior executive who's reading my email is reading it on a phone. And I saw this study, I think MIT had done it like at least 10, 12 years ago, where they had students as part of a project sort of follow around these like executives at different companies. I think they were all CFOs actually. And uh, they noticed after the fact when they're putting together all their results that every one of them had a casual game on their phone. Right. And anyone who's not familiar with it, what a casual game is, a casual game is any game where you can clear a level or accomplish something in like just a few minutes. Right. And almost everyone has some sort of casual game on their phone or has. Right. And they went back and they interviewed those folks and they said the reason they do it is that they can like play the game once or twice a day for a few minutes and get a sense of accomplishment. I said, these are some of the most accomplished people that you can imagine, but they don't feel like they've accomplished anything on any given day because, they're like a high level and things move slowly and it's like a lot of pressure and whatever. And so if you can make your marketing or sales message an opportunity, a welcome distraction where they get to accomplish something, that's just golden right there. That's the ultimate goal for this kind of stuff. And it's not a bad target to aim for. Even if you fall short, you're going to do way better than the people who are just trying to convince someone else, some stranger, to like give them attention.
Yeah, that's an amazing advice. Thanks, Dean, so
Yeah,
much for sharing so much of your wisdom with myself and the audience. Really appreciate it.
you're very welcome.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.